Okay, so today we're going to be talking about balance within Valorant. I play a lot of Valorant and I like the game. So we're going to start by just talking about some of their balance do's and don'ts. So they start by saying that they prioritize the audience that they think will lead the direction in the game in the correct direction at its current state. If it's too competitive, we want to lead it back towards the fun. So we'll be listening to the more casual community. If it's too casual, we'll be listening to the competitive. Valorant is inherently a competitive game, so it doesn't have a ton of goofy shit to always dive in. But so I think they're more likely to listen to the competitive in most situations. We won't make every player happy. This is something that you learn in general as a designer, or just any artistic thing, I suppose. You're never going to make anybody happy. And here, specifically with balance, one change you make within a game is always going to upset a different niche audience. And that's just what it is. They also say that they will never seek perfect 50-50 balance. This is because earlier we had talked about meaningful choice, where when a decision has no weight, it is not equal, or it has too much weight, it's unequal. So what we really want to be doing here is we want to be offering sort of uneven, right? So earlier we had talked about giving a player and a pistol that kills everything, or a regular assault rifle, right? So with that, if I give you the same option of a pistol that kills everything in one shot, but it has one bullet per magazine and the reload is super long, or a sword that you can swing every 2.5 seconds, that's a choice, because they have their own trade-offs. So by making that choice unequal, or each choice have their own strengths and weaknesses, we make a meaningful choice. But if I give you two pistols that do the exact same thing, it doesn't really matter which one you pick, because you're going to get the same result regardless. So yeah, next they talked about their core gameplay loop of plan, execute, and intel. They call this the tactical cycle. So starting at execute, this is actually performing like the action. This can be shooting, this can be executing a plan, this can be using your abilities. This is playing like your actual inputs that are resulting this. Intel is sort of a metagame. This is how information is being communicated to the player and how they're absorbing it. So you execute a plan, and then we go into intel, where now you're gathering intel to then plan, which is the next step, which is to use the intel gathered to then create a new plan of action, and then you execute it again. So it's a loop, right? With this loop, it should be said that a lot of emphasis is put on executing within Valorant. You can plan and gather as much intel as you want, but mechanically speaking, if you don't hit your shots, if you don't use your ability correctly, if you fuck up your ult, you should lose, is what they want. Because while yes, planning and intel are very important to Valorant's game DNA, I suppose, at the end of the day, it's a mechanically intensive game, and if a player is mechanically better than another one, they should be able to beat them. Okay? Yeah. And then they go into something called a balance radar, which we'll be talking about in a second. This is essentially how they go about balancing stuff, or processing information, or balancing stuff, sounds correct. So they start by sourcing data. We'll talk about the data types they have in a second, but they start by sourcing data, and then they prioritize that data based on what they're looking for at that time, or if they're not looking for anything specific, they probably are most of the time. So let's say they're looking for something specifically, they prioritize that data, and then with that data, they make a problem statement. What are we trying to achieve given this data, right? Let's say they figure out that they're seeing a lot of kills with Raise Nade. Okay, Let's zone in on raise pick rate, raise ability kills, and raise weapon picks, stuff like that. And then using that, they can deduce, okay, with all this information, is raises nade a problem, or is there something else in here? And from that, they devise a problem statement, or they probably won't continue if there isn't, and they'll just keep looping within sourcing data and problem statement. From there, we go into balance work group. I imagine this is just analyzing the data using our problem statement and trying to deduce where the actual problem is. And then from the balance work group, we go into a designer and solution iterative loop, which means the balance team tells the designer about this problem, and the designer devises a solution, and then they iterate on the solution over and over again until they get to an acceptable one. Afterwards, they communicate the change to the players, and then they keep a pulse within the community to see what the players are thinking. So yeah, that's essentially like how the balance process works. The types of data they're actually sourcing within that first step is game data and sentiment data. Game data is actually like metrics they keep track of within game. I mentioned a few earlier, agent pick rate, agent win rate, agent weapon rate, start side win rates, are defenders or attackers more likely to win on this map, stuff like that. They then talk about how they use their design philosophy within balancing. Specifically, they use something called a bounds system. It's not really like a system per se, but it's essentially like they have internal metrics that they use to measure certain things. Like, let's do agent win rate, or agent pick rate, or agent everything. How is this agent being perceived within the community and within the game? And then using that, we can keep track of it. Okay, is this character seen as busted, or are they seen as trash? If they are seen as one of those two things, given either game data, too high win rate, too high pick rate, or sentiment data, players complaining about it in the forums, players complaining about it in surveys, then they begin that balance iterative process where they're checking a certain agent using game data and all that fun jazz to see where the problem is. And that's pretty sick, because with design, processing feedback is a hard thing to do. And more often than not, what you can end up doing is overbalancing or tweaking something incorrectly. So I think going forward, I'm going to try to implement a core design philosophy that I can then base player feedback off of. Yeah, that's it.